The topic today, how to buy a business, financing and closing the deal. We have covered this before. It's actually a topic that I've been doing intermittently for a number of different years. It is a great way to get into a business, and we have a wonderful panel that will help us address that. So to my immediate left is Angie Truckee. Angie is a commercial lender at Highland Bank. To Angie's left, Mike Sigler, owner and CEO of Maxim USA. Leah, third one over, is founder and managing partner, Leah Barron of Marin Investment Partners. And then last but not least, Debbie Walker-Cool, attorney at Frederickson and Byron. And they, like Clubby and Brimacombe Capital, are sponsors of Mesa. So thank you for being here, Debbie. All right, so why don't we start with Angie? We'll work our way this way. Everybody can give a little more color on your background. Probably have to hold the thing down, and off you go.
There we go.
There we go.
Angie Truckee. I'm a commercial banker at Highland Bank. As Rick mentioned, Highland is a family-owned community bank. We're working our way to about $800 million in assets. We have 7 locations across the state of Minnesota, 6 here in the metro. We're an SBA preferred lender, which is a great tool for a business acquisition. I've been in banking for about 25 years, and most of those with Highland Bank. So thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us, Angie. Mike.
Hello, everyone. Mike Sigler. I am actually an engineer by training and had spent my career working at large Fortune 100 companies, and essentially decided to go on my own, hired a team to help me find and close a couple of different deals. So happy to be here, and thanks, Rick.
Great. Thanks for being here, Mike. Leah.
Hi, Leah Barron. Marin Investment Partners is a firm that I founded 2 years ago now. We're an independent sponsor, so we don't raise a fund before we do acquisitions. We find our acquisition targets, whether it's manufacturing, distribution, services type organizations, and then sign with them and raise capital around those different deals and theses. So that is my firm. I'm joined by 2 partners who have private equity experience. My background is private equity. Before that, I was in the alternative investment world as a whole, doing due diligence and analysis. And then prior to that, I served as a chief administrative officer and chief financial officer. So lots of operational background, and we'll get more into what differentiates Marin, but the biggest focus for me is the fact that companies are made up of people, and human capital, the culture behind a business, is in fact a value driver. McKinsey shows that when you have a strong employee culture, your revenue is 4 times higher than if you don't. And so we look at that as a strategic value lever, along with operational efficiency, professionalization, technological improvement, et cetera.
Hey, thank you for joining us. And Debbie.
My name is, Debbie, and I'm an attorney at Frederickson and Byron. I'm in the corporate group. I do a lot of M&A, so purchases, sales of companies, and then a lot of capital raise. And then capital raises through like venture capital, et cetera, and then working on both the business side and the investor side. And then along with all of that comes the general corporate work. Once a company has money, we help them with everything going on inside the business. And I feel strongly also, I love what you said, Leah, about governance and leadership. And I think some of that came from my prior experience when I was a director at a nonprofit, actually, that rescued girls from sex trafficking. And I was in the leadership a lot, and culture and leadership and tone from the top has a lot to do with successful businesses.
Thank you for being here. Let's jump all the way down here, and Angie, we'll start with you. Everything starts with being able to buy the business, and to buy the business, you have to have some money, hence you got to know a banker. So from a banker's perspective, what makes a business and a borrower attractive to a bank as they're looking at whether they want to get involved or not?
First thing I would say in regards to a business, banks really like to see that the business has repeatable revenue or predictable revenue that is going to generate sufficient cash flow to repay what we're going to lend you. Another thing we would want to look at is what does the client base look like? Are there concentrations? Is it well diversified? Is it too reliant on one or two particular clients? Those are a few things. In regards to an individual, what do you know about the business? What do you know about the industry? Do you have, all the aspects a business owner might need? And not everybody's going to, but if you do, great. If you don't, who's in your resource network? Who do you know that can be part of your team and help fill the gaps for running that business?
And then what do you think are the most common reasons that a bank denies a request for a loan?
Sure. Not enough equity. Not enough equity contributed. Too much concentration with a customer base. Not enough revenue to, show sufficient cash flow. Unwillingness to provide personal guarantees from those business owners. Few of the top ones.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
And then just a reminder for everybody here in the audience, everybody on the panel can stick around afterwards. So if there's somebody on the panel that you'd like to ask a question, please hang out afterwards and you can see them. Mike, as the person on our panel who now is running how many different businesses? Two different businesses. Why did you choose to go buy a business versus starting your own from scratch? And why might people in the audience do the same?
Yeah, well, thanks. So first of all, I had always kind of been a turnaround guy. So I have been brought in as part of my corporate gigs, brought into organizations that were underperforming. And so my job was always go in and figure out what's broken and fix it. And if that means it's people, if it's processes, if it's customers, whatever that is, figure out how to fix it. And so I'd done that about 3 or 4 times and got to a point where I was like, well, I can do this on my own. And I'd never really been a guy who was like, I can do this in my garage on my own. There's a lot of people who do that, and I'm in awe of them and their energy and their capabilities. But I'm like, I think I'm better to pick up something that someone else has undervalued or left or have, it's not appreciated, and take it to the next level. And so that's been the truth now twice. I've done 3 transactions. The last 2, I purchased a company, 2 different companies, and both were folks retiring, tired, didn't have the skills they needed, didn't have the network they needed to kind of take things to the next level. And so I was able to go in there and inject new energy, inject new capital, people, dollars, partnerships, and kind of take those to the next level. So that's why.
And then what's the one thing that you think buy-side M&A people would be surprised about, given your experiences?
Yeah, I think M&A is a tough process. It's incredibly draining. And I would say the biggest surprise for me on the buy side was the emotional stability you have to provide to the process. You're buying from people who have owned this thing for years, and it's their baby and it's their reputation, and it gets emotional as you put numbers on paper and documents have things in them like reps and warranties and things like that, where they're like, what do you mean I'm on the hook for the financials for the last 5 years? And so you have to kind of guide the process, and you have to be very, very focused on taking the emotion out, dealing with the emotion that seller is going to spring up along the way, even to like the day of closing. So it becomes a project you have to actively manage every single day. And I think that's a surprise. A lot of people think in the business world, hey, we're logical. We've got this thing to get done. Let's do it. No, it's an emotional journey.
Thank you. Thank you. Leah, so you had some background in private equity, and then now you've had your own firm for 2 years. For somebody thinking about becoming an entrepreneur through an acquisition, what are some of the best ways to find deals versus just getting whatever the broker community? Nothing against brokers, but what beyond just what you're seeing coming in? How do you go about finding businesses?
Yeah, so in terms of finding the businesses, there's certainly just this entrepreneurship through acquisition world has exploded. There are search funds which will partner with you, search with them on a company, you guys both raise equity around it, and then you then run that business as the CEO with a slug of equity in there. Another version of that our private equity firm that I was with, and what I've done as a private equity investor, is partnered with a CEO who's looking. So much like that, but we're not putting them on the hook necessarily to raise all the capital. We have the relationships, we structure the deal, they get incentives much like a search fund would, but it's just a more traditional private equity kind of deal. So you have a little bit more of the less onus necessarily on the CEO, but that can also come with less ownership proportionally. So there's lots of different ways to do it. I would say if you're, we have this joke in the private equity business that no deal is truly proprietary. Like it really, I mean, if a seller is talking to you, they're probably talking to somebody else as well. So whether it's through a listing or through a broker or through an investment bank, we generally don't always go that route. Our differentiated origination strategy, not that it's anything new, is that my partner owns an equipment finance company. So he happens to know all the manufacturers in Minnesota and the Midwest because he's done equipment finance deals for them. And so it's been a natural succession planning question. Well, what are you doing with the business? You're 76 years old. What are you going to do next? Right? And so that's been a way that we've found businesses. We can't always go buy all the businesses that we look through. We probably vet 400 to 500 deals per year. And so private equity firms, in terms of finding deals, you can go to a private equity firm and say, hey, I'm looking for this size company. If you run across any in this industry, let me know. And you have that as a source of origination versus going through, just listings or just brokers or just the things that are coming at you that you can do yourself. So you can leverage off of those existing capital partners, not just for capital, but also connections.
So the industry used to feel more spreadsheet driven. You mentioned culture as a differentiator for your firm. How have you seen the private equity world evolve towards more value creation?
Well, there are 14,000 private equity firms per a LinkedIn stat that said there's more private equity firms than McDonald's. And I'm gonna preface that by saying that private equity can also be private debt, and it can also be venture capital, and it can also be so when you look at it that way, there are a lot of firms out there, though. I mean, it's a very stiff competition type world. 20 years ago, it was less. 20 years before that, it was less. And 1946, it was invented. So it's been around for a long time. As an asset class, it has grown. It's matured. It's still the top performing asset class. However, when you have a lot of new entrants to the space, and I'll point out myself, right? I started my own firm. When you have that, you have more saturation in certain industries. So, however, I'll combat that by saying that there are 4,000 public companies right now. There are millions of private companies. And so if you're looking for edge, and if you're looking for something that can get you returns, and looking for niche businesses in niche industries that have really defensible market positions, you'll probably find them in the private world. And so that's been something that helps me stay awake at night, being number 14,001. But the differentiation piece is really very real. I run across a lot of private equity firms and I happened into privite equity. I didn't seek it out. I joined as a chief financial officer and ended up doing deals and loving it. And so when I brought my experience to the private equity world, I was just kind of shocked. I was like, wait a second, like business is all about culture and driving your team and like providing leadership and tone from the top, like you said. And I wasn't seeing that as being emphasized. And I was like, this is missing from the boardroom. Like, no wonder, right? There's so much that you can do to enhance the value of that company by focusing on what is the employee experience, because when you take care of your employees, the revenue takes care of itself.
Thank you. All right, so now we're going to get into the nuts and bolts. We call our attorney. and we say, hey, you got a bunch of corporate experience, you're an M&A expert. For some of the people in the audience who maybe this is a first go around, we saw a bunch of hands go up where they're out looking for a business. Debbie, tell us a little bit about the pros and cons of an asset versus a stock sale.
I will say, do please call your attorney. I realize, I know that they say legal is where dreams go to die, but we're here to help you. It can get yourself a good attorney who is no nonsense.
Not ChatGPT.
Not ChatGPT, so we don't have to rewrite all that for you. And you want an attorney who can see this process through with you. You don't need them right away. But I will say, when you get to the point of deciding, I want to buy this company, and you're determining whether you're going to buy the company, the equity off the owners, or you're going to buy some of those assets, you really need to be talking to your tax advisors, because there could be a massive difference from a tax perspective on whether or not you take those assets and you get the stepped up basis of those, or you take what the seller has in the company. So talk to your accountants. From a just legal standpoint, there are the considerations of the process for an asset sale and an equity sale, and then there are actually the legal issues. This is how I like to view it, from just more like a process or like a picture standpoint. It's like somebody has a shopping trolley and they have all their stuff in it and you think it looks good. Either you come alongside them with your own and you pick the stuff out. I'll take this, I won't take that, I'll take this, I won't take that, and you gather it into your own structure, whether it's a corporation, an LLC, whether it's a couple of entities together with a holding, whatever you're doing, or you just say, I like that thing, I'm just taking the whole trolley with me, everything in it. And so from a legal standpoint then, if you're taking all the assets and the legal structure, you're on the hook for all the liabilities that are in that business. You're taking the structure, you're taking all of it. Now, a good lawyer will make sure you paper that. So if there's things that you haven't seen in the process, there's liabilities out there, they've terminated somebody and there's a discrimination claim, or they have some hidden debt, or somebody has a right of first refusal in the company and you haven't seen it, et cetera, you're papering that, so you're not on the hook. But you're taking this whole thing, and usually, I will say from a process standpoint, it's a tad easier, because you're not picking and choosing, you're not trying to figure out what, I like this business, what is it that makes up the business, you're just taking the whole thing. You get the company name, et cetera. You make sure all the IP comes, you make sure it's all papered, but it comes with it. If you do the asset one, on the other hand, that is, you can be a bit more meticulous going through and deciding what in that business actually makes up that business. What do I like? What is it that I've seen that has value? And you take those pieces and you leave behind the other pieces along with their liabilities. You're not taking any of the issues connected with them. The process is a bit more detailed though, because you really have to make sure that when you walk away with that company, you are walking away with the things of value that actually make up all the pieces of that company. And it's quite easy sometimes to think you've got it all and you haven't. And so it makes for a bit, we're more annoying in that process. I'm going to tell you, your lawyers are going to be more annoying. But what we want to do is make sure that when you walk away with this business, you actually have it. So even as Angie's talking about the client and the client base, we're always all up in that, because we need to figure out, here's a big client, it's a big part of your revenue. We have to make sure that if we take this company, on both sides you have to do that, but it's a little different usually with an asset deal. It's often a bit more, you get a bit more tripped up on that. We need to make sure that they actually are legally obligated to go with the new owners, and you don't want to realize, oh no, we've left behind this client and that was a huge part of the revenue. So basically it's a process. There's pros and cons. Tax is going to be a big question for you, and whether or not which is better for you, and that'll impact the purchase price, because you might cover that in your purchase price. You'll give the seller a bit more if you're getting the better tax deal, or vice versa. So make sure you've got the tax covered and make sure that's really to your benefit. And then the other piece is asset deal, a little bit more complicated, but we're going to be all up in your grill either way.
So speaking of being up in the grill, and to prevent, some of the preventable, what are some common legal mistakes that you see buyers make, whether it's while they're going through due diligence or the closing process?
Some of that is that due diligence process where it is a pain, because you're really getting into the weeds of the business and saying, hey, we need to see that contract. So they have these top 10 customers or top 100 customers or 200, and we need to see those contracts, because what often happens is you're about to close and you realize buried in one of those is a prohibition on the owner selling the company without you getting their prior written consent, and it might be at 90 days prior written consent. And so this big customer suddenly can walk away if they want. So we see that often in those pieces. I think IP can be a big one too. Make sure that they actually own the IP. And so you really need to make sure, if they're saying we built this software or we have this brand, et cetera, that you get into the details of that to make sure they actually own it. There isn't some early founder or early software engineer or somebody who actually has a claim to that, because you could buy something and then you don't own it. Now, we'll get that covered, so they should really be on the hook for making you whole, but it's a big process and a lot of money that's avoidable, I think, in the process. So I see that all the time. I think from when you're very early on, one thing I would say is it's very emotional for people, and so you want to be friendly and you want it to be smooth. You also have to remember that they are on the opposite side of you. And so you might be having all these people love you, you're gonna buy this company, et cetera. Make sure that the people that are important to that company are coming with the company, because the last thing you wanna do as well is get on the other side of that, and then if something goes a little south in those first couple of months, you've been great mates in the process and they're gone and there's nothing you can legally do about it. So just keep that in your mind, that you're...
All right, let's assume that somebody's going through the due diligence process, and while Angie come back down here to you, we'll start with you, but then the panelists can just chime in whenever they'd like. What's one key due diligence item that the buyer should definitely not skip out on?
A thorough financial review by a third party.
All right.
Make sure the financial information you're being provided is accurate. It's what's been filed with the IRS. They're recording all of their expenses and everything properly. I've seen plenty of financial statements that just a part-time bookkeeper has put together. And we as bankers have a lot of questions.
All right. Anybody else? Mike?
Yeah, I would say I would go back to the HR side. Both deals I've done, there was some employee issue in the past, right? And making sure that you understand all the details behind that, and that it's closed and it's been taken care of, and there's no long tail on anything that might show up later. Those things are really important. And a lot of times you're like, well, this is a new start, right? No, there's a lot of legacy there that you have to be paying attention to.
Oh, that's such a good one. There's so many things that we look at. I mean, we're looking at legal, we're doing an insurance due diligence, we're doing our quality of earnings. You know, you're going in, you're looking at the quality of the IP. One thing that I have recognized as being very important is kind of the reputation of the founder, reputation of the seller. That one surprised me in a couple circumstances where that, you know, you can have a great brand, but the reputational, like, where has she burned bridges, right? And so it's a really interesting kind of more of a kind of intangible that you're looking at, right? But if you can dive into that, you know, trying to get into the industry more, trying to understand, okay, how is this company viewed in comparison with its other competition, all that kind of stuff is an important one that often goes a little bit less checked than should be.
Debbie?
I think that pay attention sometimes to those nuanced questions, and so it probably it ties into all of them. But you'll ask the company, do you have any outstanding litigation? And they'll say no. But they might have had somebody who's had a conversation and somebody's annoyed, and that's sitting out there, and that's going to turn into litigation. And so we often have more questions, and it gets annoying because it seems repetitive, but it's actually like, have you had any letters, communication, written, oral, anything that indicates that there's an issue with this line of business or with the employees, et cetera. So I would say don't skip out on some of those, and because you could be excited to get the business, et cetera. And, you know, just make sure you're asking from different angles, because it's amazing what will surface, and you can take care of that ahead of time.
And that qualifies as getting into the grill. That's the getting into the grill part. Yes. All right. So as we've talked about here, and you all have seen, with the rise of independent sponsor search funds, first-time buyers, and Mike, you've been through it a couple times, buying a business. What makes a buyer credible to the seller, and what helps a deal get to the finish line? Chime in, whoever'd like to take that as a start.
I'll start. I'd say credibility. You definitely need to understand their business, right? You can't walk in completely flat-footed. You've got to have done your homework. You have to be genuinely interested. You have to have some capability of running it yourself. I think what a lot of the sellers I've run into is they want somebody who will, take that legacy forward, right? They want someone that they can put a little bit of, equity into as well, not physical equity, but emotional. And so I think it's being able to show that you've done this before, you've been there, you can take it to the next level. They're going to be proud of what you're going to do with it. That's a big piece of it, I believe.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I get this question more on the capital raising side than on the sell side, but it truly is, how investment bankers, when there's a process and they're represented by an investment bank, there will be more onus on it because the investment banker or the advisor, God bless them, but they'll be like, I don't know, independent sponsor could be hard to close. They might not have the capital. Their LP could back out at the last second. Well, that's the case. We've also done several transactions, right? So it's more of a conversation point, and it's something that you have to be ready to give an answer for. Where are you getting your capital? Now, you don't have to give the name of your LP, but you should be able to explain who you've talked to, in terms of soft commits and things like that. And again, like you said, knowing the industry, knowing what you're going to do with the business, because private equity business ownership is not passive investing. You should invest in real estate or the stock market if you want truly passive investing. This is the most active hands-on job you could possibly buy yourself. And so it is not for the faint of heart. It's not for somebody who wants to get rich quick. It is truly brutal in a lot of ways, but very rewarding at the same time. Not to scare anyone.
Yeah, I would say it's interesting, and we say this all the time as lawyers and probably every other industry, how important communication is. And emails are flying around at all times of the day and night. And I think at least from the legal perspective, I think if a buyer can be very plugged in, but then also just making sure it gets to the right people. It's often you don't need the buyer feedback on everything throughout, but you need it getting to the right places on time, so it keeps it moving and keeps everybody confident. And the emotional piece is huge. I remember I closed one deal, and we do so many of them, and the buyer and the seller on the other side of this deal was kind of like, I was expecting balloons to fall from the ceiling. It was just like he'd grown this business, and then everybody was like, all right, great, see you later.
Yeah. I like to say that a deal will die 3 times before it actually gets done, right? Like it is, you fight to get, the proactivity around the communication and putting your best foot forward, and then something happens where it's like, oh, I don't know, you run into one issue, and then it's, it'll die a couple more times before it gets done. So don't lose heart. That's how it happens, but it's the true communication, coming back to the table, showing that you're still interested, that you want to make it work. That's the coolest part, is when you do bring transparency to the table and collaboration of like, well, that's not going to work, but what about this? Is when you can innovate and find constructive ways of bringing a deal forward rather than just writing it off.
I'll add, if financing is in your package, as Leah mentioned, a credibility on your capital, is your bank a reputable bank that has done transactions, and being able to speak that.
Great. So speaking of deals dying, a term is a retrade, which means a renegotiation. We've touched on deals dying 3 times and broken deals. What's one LOI term that you think can help prevent that?
A term? I'm not sure if I can use a term, but I will comment that making sure that both sides of the party kind of understand your math. To hone in on that final purchase price and what adjustments are being made, and Do you all agree at how you're getting to the same point?
Yeah, those adjustments are often a sticky spot. Anybody else?
Yeah, I would say alongside of that, just the methodology that you're using. So you don't have to go into exactly what your working capital target is going to be, but you do need to share, here's my methodology, and I am going to include this in the letter, right? But then also just the structuring around how you are intending to structure that deal, have it as a term and be pretty sure that you're going to go down that route, because that's where, you don't want to have to come in and be like, oh, I can't get all the financing I need. Will you seller finance this for me? Right? Or a portion of it, right? So you want to just be confident in saying, no, this piece of it is going to be seller financed because you've had the conversation with your banker beforehand.
I'll answer it a little bit differently. I trust my attorney. He drafted the document for me. I trust that everything is there that needs to be there, including things that the seller doesn't understand and doesn't want to understand or sign up for. But I have a good group of people around me to help explain why it's there. So I've got my accountant, I've got my attorney, I've got my banker, I've got my M&A advisors who are smarter than me, who have done this before, a lot more than I ever have. So when there's a rep and warranty and this has to be there and that has to be there and the seller's like, what is this? I go, let me get the answer for you and bring them along on the journey, because a lot of the folks that are selling aren't savvy, aren't on private equity boards, aren't into this every day. And so you have to kind of explain to them the importance of these components and why they're there for them and you. And a lot of times there's a lot of kind of empathizing with them around, well, you know what? I'm not quite sure either what the best aspect between these two things is. Let's go figure it out together. And a lot of times that builds credibility as well, that it's not me driving this home, it's my tax accountant driving this home, and your tax accountant should care about that too. And let's figure it out together. So that's how I'd answer that.
Yeah, I mean, you do very big deals, I think, a lot of the time, or bigger purchases. I think sometimes with the LOIs that are for very large purchases, you need a lot of detail. And I think I do a lot of small add-ons, which I love. They're a bit more scrappy. But I would say make sure in those that a lot of just those customary things are in there, because so with the larger deals, just be detailed. If this is something you're going to have and you're going to need, get it in there. And with the smaller deals, I think you can provide a bit more flexibility. I've even seen some be like, once we get through diligence, we'll see if it's going to be an asset or equity deal or that type of thing. But I would still make sure they have customary reps and warranties. The last thing you want is somebody thinking they're going to sell a company and then walk away and just hand you the whole thing with zero liability. And I've had that recently where I've gotten a term sheet and I've just thought, ooh, man, this is a bit of a mess, because now for my party, I don't have much leeway here. So,
All right. Angie, a question for you on the typical financing stack. Talk a little bit about how the typical split is between equity and or seller financing and then the bank debt, just at a high level. Sure. To give everybody some guidelines on that.
Sure. Of course, that's a complicated question because it really will kind of depend on the actual transaction, the size of the transaction. But from a bank perspective, a lot of times on these types of deals, we'll use SBA tools. SBA has a 10% minimum equity requirement. There's, some wiggle room there with more lengthy conversation. But generally speaking, we probably see somewhere in the 50 to 75% from a bank, 10% equity, with the rest being seller financing. Banks love seller financing as part of the LOI.
All right.
Sellers hate financing.
Yep.
All right. So we're going to shift gears. I'm going to do lightning round. So looking for a quick, hard-hitting answer on what is intended to be a concise question. Intended to be being the key phrase there. What industries are most financeable and why?
I think that's for me.
And
An industry with repeatable income or revenue.
all right.
Probably can't hone in on a whole lot. Business to business, service type businesses are obviously ones that come to the top of my mind.
Okay.
But predictable revenue and good cash flow.
Leah?
I would say the opposite is professional services is harder than a manufacturing or a company that has hard assets. If you're looking at a manufacturing firm, the bank can say, okay, I have this hard asset, that hard asset, that hard asset. With a professional services firm, it's mostly based on people and reputation. And if you don't have signed contracts that say this is how much I'm going to pay, this company's going to pay me every year, it's not repeatable. Even though you have a loyal customer relationship, still not a financeable transaction.
Same. All right. Is there a red flag? And if so, what is it that you would walk away immediately upon figuring it out?
For me, it would be legal. If something was uncovered, if things that you were talking to about with the seller were not true, or there was something that was hidden, I think I would question the integrity of the whole process, and I'd probably close it up and walk away.
Yeah, I would say if they can't stand by making reps and warranties, I would walk away if they're trying to scale too far back on those. Also, if as soon as they don't own something that is a part of the business and you think they own it, I would at least take a step back and make sure they can own that IP. There isn't some other inventor actually, etc. That's where you need to pause, make sure you can rectify that before you promise anything.
Is there an LOI term that you would fight for to make sure that it's in every LOI? We talked about some issues before coming at the other, like you need to have this.
Seller financing.
I knew it. I would put it on intellectual property, even if it's not understood 100%, like trademarks. Most small businesses aren't even paying attention to their trademarking. They blow by it. They don't want to pay for it. They don't want to invest in it. But it's like, well, that's part of what I'm buying is the brand. And how do I make sure I lock that down so I have full ownership or doing business as, if there's any additional entities that they've ever done business as, you want to make sure you have those domains. You want to make sure you have that, LinkedIn page, the Facebook page. You want to have all of those things written down, because those are like details that you'll forget about. But when you go to try to log in and use it and it's not there, that's a problem.
Well, Mike, like you said, deals are a highly emotional, highly psychological process. And one thing that I have seen really strain deals is the timeline. So in there, they're looking for, okay, you have exclusivity for 90 days, therefore it's going to close in 90 days. Therefore, I'll be nice to you until day 89. So being really realistic about how long this deal is going to take you, if you're new to this, if you haven't done it before, being honest about that up front is a really good way to go. And you're going to put a number in there, but be sure that you can stick to that number, because it'll be butterflies and roses for a good long while, and then they'll start to really get impatient with you.
The lawyers appreciate realistic timelines as well.
So do bankers.
I would say too, on top of these things, if there's somebody who's key in that business and you need them for a period of time, to make sure that's in the LOI, because people are often excited to be done.
What is the most common post-close mistake you've seen first-time buyers make?
I'll say that they didn't incorporate enough working capital. They've spent their equity to buy the business and didn't factor in enough sort of cushion to run the business those first few months.
Yeah, just because it says EBITDA does not equal cash flow. And so that's a really, really big one. You're absolutely right, Angie.
We're all good. All right. Assumptions. You make some assumptions going into a deal. Some of them work, some of them don't. Is there an example of something you made that didn't work that somebody in the audience might be able to learn from? So was there an assumption like, oh, I missed this, or underestimated that, or whatever?
Well, I had a few misses. We can talk about those after. I'd say the one that I missed was kind of the deal flow, right? The transaction flow, and what was going to go where, when, and how. The bank had a specific requirement on SBA on how things had to go, and the seller thought he was going to get a different check. I thought I was going to get a different check, and it had to flow through the bank first in a certain way. And there was some really fine details there that we were both kind of like, oh, when am I going to see that money? And don't know. So I think getting a sense of what the flow is going to look like with your banker, and that's very important.
All right. Somebody made an assumption that didn't work. I'm not going to let you off the hook. I know for myself, made some assumptions about certain aspects of markets. They were going to happen faster. The competitive position was better. There's a long list of things. Somebody had to have made an assumption beyond Mike that didn't work. Now, come on.
So we did a contract manufacturer down in St. Louis. They do protein powder, and they had this huge client contract. I mean, it was a wonderful client contract, but the timeline got stalled because they didn't own their own IP. The customer didn't, not the company we were acquiring. So that was, just because they have the beautiful signed contract, operationally, it was an assumption that, okay, this is going to work now, right? And then it stalled out. So it's the voice of customer is generally the phrase that's used, is like actually like going and when you can, because the seller will not always let you talk to their customers, but when you can, trying to get into their talk about the contract, talk about the timelines, all that kind of stuff was a assumption that I made.
Okay. All right, we'll leave it at that. We'll save that one for beer sometime or a glass of wine.
I don't make assumptions, Rick.
What?
I don't make assumptions.
Okay, of course. But you do get in the grill of people, right?
I what?
You get in the grill of people, right?
I do get in the grill.
Yeah, all right. Okay. All right, what is one thing, to wrap this up because it's 1 o'clock, what is one thing that you'd like the audience to take with them regarding today's event?
Find your team, find your resources to help you make the decision.
I'll piggyback that. Again, folks that are in this industry do this 3 times a day, and we might do it once or twice in our lifetime. So pick a good team, and I will go back to you get what you pay for, period. I know that we all want to be scrappy and we want to be agile, but if you're not willing to write a check to the best people that are out there, you're not going to get the best results. So that's just one thing to take away.
I mean, what I can tell you is buying the companies that have larger ticket prices, you de-risk. So if you're going and you're buying a smaller company, that doesn't always have a lower amount of risk to it, even though it's telling you a really strong story, which is why I went into private equity versus just acquisition through entrepreneurship. I'm a big fan of working together with people, collaborating with people, and partnering in order to take a bite out of a watermelon instead of a grape. And so, make those partnerships, do what you say you're going to do, and you're going to have a great time.
I think you should look at the process a little bit like dating and trust your gut on people. So it's a little like when you're dating somebody and they have something that's annoying, and then once you marry them, you've been married a long period of time, it's very annoying. And so I think when you're dealing, if there's people, if it's a company and people are coming, or you're bringing a partner along, or you're hiring that CEO, or whatever it is, or the money, where the money's coming from, and they're going to be a director on the board of directors, etc. Trust your gut on the people you should be partnering with, because the things that you sense in that process are usually correct, and they usually get accentuated down the line for good or for bad. So.
All right, so March 5th, we have Scaling a SaaS Company, Lessons Learned. Again, that is in partnership with the Minnesota Emerging Software Association Advisory Board, otherwise known as MESA. March 5th, hope to see you there. Let's give a round of applause for our panelists.